That's it. That's an interesting viewpoint. But to the next question, we have the typical conception of the partisan spectrum. I have a feeling I kind of know where you're going with this, but the typical conception of the partisan spectrum is Democrat, lean Democrat, independent, lean Republican, Republican. What is your take on that? And do you find these categories helpful?
Well, I mean, sure. If we said, well, there's no such thing as a Republican or a Democrat, I don't think that would help us have a clearer understanding of our political process. But I do think what we say and what some other researchers were not, this is not our idea, this is an existing idea, is that instead of a two-dimensional, or sorry, instead of a one-dimensional spectrum, there's actually a two-dimensional spectrum, right? So then instead of falling into one of two categories, um, or one of five, if you're talking about the lean Democrat and independent, then there's actually at least four spaces, right? Because you have two axes, just like an XY axis, right? And so that you can have people on the off diagonals where you would be, and this is what we find about independents, right? That like socially, they tend to be what you would call more liberal. So um, they are fine with same-sex marriage. They are less restrictive about abortion, views on abortion, those types of social policies. Um, More open to like DEI and diversity type initiatives. And coupled with expecting government to be effective and expecting us to adhere to fiscal policy that's sensible. So one of the things that we saw in the last election was that independents, if you ask them what their priorities were, affordability and inflation were major concerns. And that was also true of Republican voters, right? Like those were top priorities for them. And so it's like, you can see why these parties, or sorry, you can see why these voters are not represented by a party, right? Like they're taking from both sides. And so I think that four quadrant space that you get with a two-dimensional political diagram, this is much easier to talk about if you have a picture, but that two-dimensional way of thinking about politics to me seems more accurate in representing voter preferences. But of course, then the question is, is that a third party?